Star Wars book studies. We took a break for a little while because Al wanted to do some rewatches and stuff like that. And with the holidays here, I think our plan is to do a live stream this this Friday night and talk about what's coming up. But I'll just tell you guys some of that now because I want to recommend something for you all to go do if you're interested uh, in Star Wars book studies and the EU, you know, the dearly beloved EU. We are going to come back and we're going to do studies of the three Dark Empire, part one, part two, part three. Volumes, not just segments of the, mostly when you say Dark Empire, people think the first, main story. We're going to cover all that in one episode, and then, part two in another, and part three in another. But we're going to talk about the radio dramas too. But we talk a lot about audiobooks on this channel because Al needs to have like an audiobook playing while he's reading it. It helps him with medication and stuff like that. He's on his stuff. And I always tell people, no shame at all in an audiobook. It's a great way to get a lot more reading in today. Excuse me. And, the scheduling in the world today where you don't always have time to sit down and read a book. I think it's always important to have a book, a hard copy book that you're sitting down and reading. That's very important. It's good for your brain. You keep training it. But if you're like me, your schedule, I have very limited time where I can actually sit down at the end of the day and just open a book and read it. So with all my commutes and whatnot, I love listening to audiobooks. We talked about that. But the big bane of audiobook listeners everywhere is abridged audiobooks. They should just be freaking outlawed at this point. Talked about it before. I get it. Back in the day when you had books on tape and you couldn't fit but so much time or tape or whatever, we're so beyond that now. There's no excuse for an abridged audiobook, especially for the hearing impaired that use these, books. It's a tragedy that they're still abridged audiobooks. And so many of the wonderful Star Wars EU books have fallen victim to this abridgment. It's really tragic. If you go on Audible and you look for Star Wars EU Legends or whatever, even if you want to search for it that way, there's a lot of them on there, but they're all abridged for the most part. A lot of the old Republic books that were put out towards the end, more recently before Disney killed the EU, you can still find unabridged copies of a lot of them. And Disney now, of course, has been re-releasing on somewhat of a rolling basis, somewhat regularly. They haven't been doing it as regularly as they should, but they've been re-releasing a lot of the old EU books, just the ones that they kind of want to cherry pick and steal ideas from, as Legends, Star Wars Legends. And they release them in hardcover as well. And that's one way people say, well, let's look for what good stories are out there today. How can we send a message or whatever? And I think there's an argument to be made for going and buying the Star Wars Legends book, because then you're telling Disney, this is the thing that's making you money, not your new crap continuity, but the versions of this you release from the old continuity. I can't bring myself to buy those myself because I loathe that Legends banner. It's just such a spit in the face to me. It's such an insult to EU fans. It's telling your continuity doesn't matter anymore. That's a legend. We do real canon, just like who do you think you are, So that just grates on me. Plus, I spend a lot of time. I collect a hard copy library of the Star Wars EU books, and I've been spending a lot of time collecting and curating that, to kind of keep that around. And I mean, like the original copies, I get hardcovers whenever I can, even for the books that were in paperback. I try to get like library bound copies or whatever that are in hardback, even if you couldn't buy them in the store from hardcovers or whatever. So I try and do my best with that. And it's an ongoing, lifelong collection. But whenever Disney releases an EU book, re-releases it under the Legends banner or whatever, they haven't done this on every one, which I think is tragic. But for a lot of them, they release new unabridged audio versions of them. And they were working on the X-Wing Chronicles. They were working on that for a while. They stopped midway. I'm like, you got to finish the Chronicles if you started it, But two Star Wars EU novels that the unabridged audio is going to drop this Tuesday. Outbound Flight by Timothy Zahn, which of course is the great origins of Thrawn in the proper Star Wars EU, not the garbage origins that Zahn wrote for Disney continuity. That makes him Papa Smurf. That's not Admiral Thrawn. That's a vanilla wishy-washy evil Smurf. That's all he is. The proper Admiral Thrawn, this was his first time introduced, like chronologically, his first time coming into the Star Wars EU and into that area of space in that galaxy, and that's in Outbound Flight. Really great book. They've had an abridged version on Audible for so long, but now the unabridged audio is dropping Tuesday. So this is a way to send a message, if you want to go out and look for new stories that are good, even though they're not new because they're old, but they're great. That's a great one. Survivor's Quest is the other one that's dropping on Tuesday. I think that's the only two that are dropping Tuesday. Their release before this, they were doing a release of some new re-released EU books, Yoda's Dark Rendezvous, but they didn't release the audio of that. So I thought that was kind of crappy. But anyway, those are two things that Al and I will probably do Outbound Flight first. After we cover our book studies of Dark Empire, we'll probably jump into Outbound Flight first. So just giving you a heads up of what's coming up with that, and giving you a recommendation. Go check that out. Go check out Outbound Flight and Survivor's Quest. Those are two things you can spend your money on now and get some wonderful, solid stories. Even if you read them back in the day, the audio productions are wonderful. If you're going to do an Audible book, if you're like me and have commutes or whatever, or if you just want to listen to it for the first time, that's a way to do it. So that's my recommendation there.